So recently Simon, the owner of Hytale, was interviewed by Elrich MC, and one of the questions in this interview really stood out to me, mainly because Elrich seemed to really care about this question.
So this, for me, it's also an important thing. Can you tell us about the skin system? Will creators be able to have specific skins approved by you? Or does the editor allow pixel by pixel editing? For me, it's very important to have my skeleton dark. I need to have my wither skeleton skin.
You can really hear the anticipation in his voice. His appearance in the game is very important to him, which makes sense because we're talking about his identity and his brand, and I can tell that he really wanted Simon to tell him that he would be able to transfer that identity over to Hytale.
You know, this is probably one of the hardest questions, and people might not like the answer, but it's like, I understand that people are coming from Minecraft and maybe Roblox and are expecting like full control of their avatar, but I feel like there's several reasons, right? It might be distracting from the art style, like having like people that are making weird skins or offensive skins. Of course, we could moderate, but to be honest, like it would be a nightmare to do so. Like I just want to keep our team small for now. We will explore having some kind of submission system later on, but right now I just want to relieve that pressure from ourselves to say like, look, we're going to take a look later, but I understand it's important. I think it would be great for us as well to have the community help us with that, because then it would relieve the pressure that we have on our artists. I want my artists to be making other things than cosmetics, obviously, and avatar stuff. So yeah, again, no promises. There's much to do. Maybe in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. I don't want to make promises. I want to please everyone, but sometimes when you try to please everyone is disappointed. And I think for us, it allows us to be in a position where if we control the avatar, we can keep the price of the game very low, because our founder edition helps us counter that. So the countries that don't have much money are able to buy the cheapest version of the game and experience Hytale. Meanwhile, the people that wants to support the game, they can buy the bigger version because we control the avatar completely. So there's a lot of things to think about.
Unfortunately, Simon's answer wasn't very reassuring. It's quite obvious that Simon wasn't very happy giving that answer. He obviously understands the importance of people's, and especially YouTubers' need to express their identity in the game, but he believes that it is just not currently possible to give people the ability to create custom skins because of the high cost of moderation and the stylistic inconsistency from user-submitted cosmetics. Luckily, I am here to tell him that he is wrong. It is possible, and it won't require a lot of money, nor will it have any impact on development, so you can start implementing the solution right away. And that solution comes from a very unexpected place, and happens to be one of the most successful video games ever, that being Pokémon Go. In this game, you spin Pokestops to collect items, which you can then use to play the actual game. These Pokestops are all based on locations in the real world, like libraries, local cafes, or hiking trail signs. There are many guidelines for what constitutes a Pokestop, and they are quite strict and narrow and pretty complex and confusing. Additionally, there's obviously a lot of opportunity and quite frankly motive for abuse and fake submissions. And even though it has all of this working against it, there are still several million Pokestops in the game. Logistically, this shouldn't be possible without spending a fortune on moderation, but somehow almost every single Pokestop sticks closely to the guidelines and very few fake ones slip through the cracks, and their price, almost nothing. How did they do it? The bar of entry is high. To nominate a Pokestop, you need to be a very high trainer level in the game, which takes a very long time to get to. Making bad submissions will get your entire account banned, so any bad actor is quickly weeded out. Submissions are time-locked. Early in development, there was a 14-day cooldown between each nomination, but nowadays you get a new one every day, and you can have a maximum of 40 available nominations since the review systems are a lot more streamlined and there's less of a backlog. Automated moderation handles the obvious. Images are scanned by AI for near-duplicate detection and to detect certain patterns that would disqualify submissions. Luckily, it is very easy to train an AI to do this, as the human reviewers generate a lot of data about which submissions to reject and why. Anything that doesn't get picked up by the AI moderation then goes on to be reviewed by the players on the Niantic Wayfarer website. Now, you might wonder, how can players possibly be expected to follow these complex guidelines to review all these submissions correctly? Wouldn't they mess up a lot? Or worse, give random or intentionally wrong answers? The solution is the wisdom of the crowd. A crowd guessing the amount of jelly beans in a jar will almost be guaranteed to answer within a 10% of the right number. Contestants who poll the studio audience in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire will be right 91% of the time. If you ask a large number of people anything at all, they are often more accurate than an expert. For each submission, a number of people are polled. The number can vary, but let's say 20. An error margin of about 10% is assumed. So if just 2 or less reviewers reject the submission, it passes. If more more than 10% but less than 30% reject the submission, you ask another 20 people. That can be repeated maybe 2 or 3 times depending on how many rejects it gets. With 30% or more rejects, the submission is rejected outright. Both the number of reviewers and the threshold for rejection can be tweaked depending on the backlog. Additionally, reviewers receive a rating based on how likely they are to agree with the correct decision, and their answers are given more weight the higher this rating is. The reviewers are also subject to the same high bar of entry as the nominators, so you pretty much never get duplicates, fake accounts, or ban evasion. But what's their incentive to do this? Basically, for every 100 or so successful reviews they make, they get to upgrade one of their own nominations, giving them a fast pass through the system. These upgrades are usually enough of an incentive to keep reviews in pace with submissions, but when the company was about to be acquired by Scopely, they needed to get through the backlog and decided to give in-game items to players that did a certain amount of reviewing, resulting in, well, crashing the servers at first, but then they got through the entire backlog in a single day. Staffed appeals. If your submission is rejected, you can apply directly to Niantic, in which case an employee will go through your submission. You only get one of these every 20 days, so players will be very careful using this. Because of that, the workload for these appeals is very minimal. This all gives us a great starting point to design a moderation system for Hytale cosmetics. Setting the bar of entry would be quite simple, just let anyone that has spent money on the game submit and review cosmetics. If online play ever becomes free of cost, just limit submissions to premium accounts only. Early in development, the volume of submissions should be kept low to make the process more manageable. This means giving each player just 1 or 2 submission slots per month, up to a maximum of 10 available slots at any given time. This default submission slot limit could increase as the system becomes more robust, and at all times, the thresholds for what is accepted should be adjusted to ensure that the backlog never gets too long, while also never running out. Individual cosmetic creators should also gain more trust in the system if they upload submissions regularly with a high ratio of acceptance to denials. The more trust they earn, the more monthly slots they should get, and their submissions should require fewer reviewers in order to pass. This way, more of the submissions will be coming from more talented creators, and the ones that submit more content will create less of a load on the review system. And there should be 4 different types of cosmetic submissions. The first and simplest one would be logos, basically single images of different sizes that could be applied to the front or back of shirts and jackets, or on the side of arms, or on the front of hats. When making a cosmetic, you can add a module to them where these logos can be added, and actually many of the official cosmetics should do this too. This way, instead of making a cat shirt and a skull shirt, you can make a single plain shirt with a logo module, then make a separate cat and skull logo that you apply to it. These logos would be extremely easy to moderate as they are literally just small images. The second submission type would be retextures. For this, creators should be able to pick from any available cosmetic model with complete animations and everything and turn it into a blank canvas that they can paint their own textures onto. This would be a lot less work than making cosmetics from the ground up, and it would be much easier to moderate too, as there would be less that could go wrong compared to adding new models. It would also mean that when players select a cosmetic, they can also see the texture variation people have made of that cosmetic. Players should also be able to add custom gradient mapping masks to part of their cosmetics that can be recolored. This is a feature that official cosmetics already use, but basically you let them paint a separate texture in black and white, which shows where to apply the gradient mapping. The gradient mapping takes the grayscale values and maps color onto it based on a gradient that the players can then customize themselves. This gradient should also be highly customizable, and you should be able to include up to at least 8 different colors that can be applied on different locations in the gradient. Importantly, you should also be able to add multiple gradient mapping masks to each cosmetic so that players can recolor multiple parts of the model. I'd personally set the limit to a relatively high number like 10. The third most complex submission type would be complete models. Just like with Minecraft's persona items on Bedrock, this will require a Blockbench plugin that can validate models and ensure that they meet the guidelines before they are even uploaded. Mainly, this needs to ensure that there aren't too many cubes used in each cosmetic, maybe limiting them to 6 cubes and 6 planes, depending on which kind of cosmetic it is. The cubes can also not be too large, and there should also be no completely invisible cubes unless they're used for animated textures. And the cubes should have somewhat consistent pixel density, or you should make sure everything has the exact same resolution. Creators will also need to use this plugin to go over all the player animations and ensure that the cosmetics moves correctly with the avatar model without any clipping. And when creating a model, they should start by picking what type of cosmetic it is, like hat, shirt, pants, and so on. Model submissions should be held to the highest scrutiny in the review process because of how complex they are in comparison to the other types of submissions. All models added to the game should also be available for retexturing by anyone who wants to make an alternate version. Basically, the models should be seen as a public good for the game to make cosmetic creation creation as simple as possible. And since they become templates for others to use, it's extra important to get this type of submission right. Each cosmetic item would also be limited to a single 128 by 128 or 256 by 256 pixel size texture file, depending on the type of cosmetic. That's something you just have to do for optimization. Unfortunately, this could become quite limiting, especially when you try to make larger cosmetics. So additionally, there should be a library of sample textures that creators can use in their models, like generic fabric, metal, or wood surfaces. It can be really annoying when you're missing one little detail and you're all out of space on the source texture. And lastly, creators should be able to upload their own emotes. This comes with a lot of potential for abuse, so there needs to be a lot of constraints and strict guidelines here. The animations should last for a maximum of 10 seconds, but there should be an option to make them loop. This means that there needs to be a transition animation into and out of each emote, and there needs to be a start and end point to the looping animation. To ensure that all emotes transition without any jarring movement, the Blockbench plugin should force all keyframes at the start and end point of the loop, and the transition animation to be identical. The plugin should also limit scaling of parts of the avatar model to a factor of 1.25 to prevent size manipulation tomfoolery, and it should also ensure limbs aren't detachable. When submitting cosmetics, creators must select tags explaining the style and themes of the submission. This is done so that servers can pick what kinds of cosmetics they want to allow. So for example, the official Hytale server can choose to only allow skins that fit the Orbis art style. That way we get the best of both worlds, where we have both stylistic consistency and freedom for the players to express themselves. When submitting a retexture or a model, the creator is first presented with a yes/no box asking if the cosmetic is made to fit the Orbis art style. If they select no, they must add a style tag, which, as the name suggests, marks what style a cosmetic is made in, like cartoony, pixel art, minimalist, or high detail. And if they select yes, they are submitting what we call an Orbis cosmetic, which can be used on any server, including the official Hypixel server. Moderation should be much stricter for Orbis cosmetics, since it's important that these are high quality and accurate to the guidelines. That means more reviewers should look at them and they require fewer rejections to fail. And if they pass, they would still need to go through a final check from an artist on the development team, especially in the beginning when you are still establishing what should and shouldn't be allowed. You can also find some trusted artists in the community to help with this. If an Orbis cosmetic is rejected for stylistic reasons, the entire submission is outright rejected and sent back with an explanation to the creator that the reviewers didn't feel like the submission fits the game. In these cases, creators should be able to resubmit without burning a slot, at least for the first couple of times per submission. On a non-Orbis cosmetic, the reviewers can just correct the style tag to a different one and move on. Theme tags should basically encapsulate the setting of a cosmetic, whether it be fantasy, medieval, steampunk, western, modern, sci-fi, and so on. There's no real reason to limit the amount of tags a creator can add, but if a tag is missing or doesn't fit, the reviewers can change it or add in new tags. To make sure cosmetics are easier to find, keywords should also be added. Unlike theme tags, these cannot be disabled in a server, but they can be much more specific and can be sorted into categories like colors, patterns, materials, shapes, vibes, dress code, animals, plants, professions, RPG classes, settings, and so on. These keywords should also be managed in review. To make all this clearer, the legendary Shaka Diarconi has made a UI concept that I will be using for demonstration purposes. To get started, reviewers must complete a comprehensive tutorial with some test reviews at the end to quiz their understanding of the guidelines. The review process should be segmented into 3 steps for each submission. First, is it appropriate? Then, does the style fit? And lastly, do the themes and keywords fit? The system should start by only asking reviewers if the submission is appropriate, since if it isn't, it will be rejected anyway. This question also needs to get in front of as many eyes as possible, as it is the most important one. The style question should always be asked after passing the first test. If the submission is an Orbis cosmetic, there should be an option for reviewers to say I don't know, since some reviewers may not be confident in answering that. Reviewers that pick this option more often will be less likely to be asked this style of questions in the future and will be provided the option to opt out of style questions altogether. It's also more important that Orbis cosmetics get in front of more eyes, so they should always be prioritized by the system. Orbis cosmetic submissions should also present reviewers with a text box where they can write feedback to the creator upon rejection. Themes and keywords should also be asked last, and it can also be deprioritized as it's not the end of the world if it is inaccurate. You can always have players suggest edits after the cosmetics are released if something goes wrong. Model submissions will additionally need to have their animations reviewed, which would drastically increase the workload for reviewers. It will therefore be important that the automated system can do as much of this as possible. And speaking of animations, the emotes would be quite simple to review, as the reviewer just need a preview of the animation looping where they can pan and zoom and they can select if it's adhering to the guidelines. The buttons here need to be time-locked, as reviewers need to actually see the whole animation from a few different angles before deciding. As reviewers progress, they are given 2 separate ratings, one general rating and one style rating. These ratings will increase if the reviewer gives the same answer as other reviewers and will decrease if they have a tendency to deviate from the other answers. The more agreement there is on a review of a submission, the more your rating will drop if you get it wrong. So say someone makes a cosmetic with a swastika and 19 out of 20 reviewers reject it, but you give it a thumbs up. Well, your rating should take a massive hit since your answers can't be taken seriously. And these ratings aren't just there to tell the reviewers if they're doing a good job. It also affects the weight of their answers. The answers of a good reviewer has more worth than a bad one because it's more likely to be accurate. If we think of each rating as a multiplier, all reviewers start in the middle at 1 and then can go up to double or down to 0.25. And the higher the rating of the reviewers, the fewer people you would need to ask for the system to make a decision, since higher ratings means more accurate answers. A double value reviewer should essentially count as 2 votes, as they would be at least half as likely to give an incorrect assessment. For lower ranked reviewers, there should also be some test reviews that appear every now and then, where the answer is already known so reviewers can be given instant feedback on their reviewing. These tests can be sourced from previously rejected submissions, as we would know why they were rejected. If the reviewers choose reject and their reasoning is correct, they are presented with a fun confetti animation telling them that they successfully passed the test, and they could additionally receive some sort of reward, though more about that later. If they answer accept or reject the submission for the wrong reason, they are not given a reward and are instead just told they failed the test and are given an explanation of why the submission was supposed to be rejected with links to the relevant parts of the guidelines. And the reason we separate the style rating from the general rating is that reviewers will differ greatly in their ability to tell what cosmetics actually fit the Orbis art style, even if we give them very clear guidelines. So basically, reviewers with high style ratings will be more likely to be asked style questions, and their answers will be weighed even higher here, as they are more likely to have a more informed opinion. In general, the reviewers should also be given some feedback on what they might be doing wrong if their rating is low, so there should be an indication if they are being too strict or too lenient. Behind the scenes, the system will automatically tweak the numbers. If the backlog gets too long, submissions will automatically get fewer eyes on them, and thresholds for how many rejections are needed can be changed to speed things up. There are basically 3 thresholds. The acceptance threshold, which should be up to 10% rejections, the uncertainty threshold, which is a range between 10 and 30%, and the rejection threshold, which is 30% or more. The uncertainty threshold is necessary to get more accurate results on submissions with unclear results. Basically, any submission that lands in this range will get 1 more round of reviews. The second time around, a hard cutoff point is set at 15% rejections. If you need to speed up the review process, you can make the window for the uncertainty threshold smaller, and if you feel the need to make reviews more accurate, you can decrease all thresholds and require fewer rejections for submissions to fail. Orbis cosmetics should always have lower thresholds for rejections compared to non-Orbis cosmetics. If a submission has fewer than 20% rejections after the second round of reviews, an option will appear to send in an appeal that would be reviewed by official staff instead of other players. We don't want this to happen too often though, so each creator gets only 1 appeal per month. It's important that we get as many reviewers as possible, as that will speed up the process and give us more accurate results. To achieve that, there will have to be incentives and rewards that are significant enough for people to want to participate. We can separate these incentives into initial rewards, designed to get people started with reviewing, and recurring benefits that keep them invested. And the main group that will have an interest in reviewing will be the cosmetic creators themselves. They have an inherent interest in clearing out the backlog, as they would want their submissions to be reviewed faster. This would especially be the case if their submission slots were locked away until submissions are done reviewing. To make it clear when their help is the most needed, there should be an indicator showing the current length of the backlog on the submission page. And for every 100 or so successful reviews, they should receive a boost that can be applied to one of their submissions, giving it a fast pass through the review system. Additionally, successful reviews should grant the reviewer temporary submission slots and could even make submission slots regenerate at a faster rate. In the UI, it could be illustrated as a bar with 5 levels, where each level takes longer to reach and points on the bar slowly decrease over time. We could say that each review is worth 1 point on this bar, and you lose a point every hour, adding up to a loss of 24 points over the course of a day. Level 1 should be fairly easy to reach, requiring only 10 points. This level should be the most lucrative one, granting the reviewer an additional 10 submission slots and doubling the submission slot regeneration rate. The other levels should be progressively more difficult to get with lower return. This makes reaching level 1 seem much more worth it, increasing the likelihood of creators doing at least a little bit of reviewing whenever they want to submit something. It's like a perpetual initial reward that repeatedly gets more creators into the reviewer workflow, making it more likely that at least a few of them will keep going all the way to level 5. Answering correctly on the test reviews could grant 5 points instead of 1, as that would make the tests more fun and less annoying. To gamify this whole thing and turn it into even more of a Skinner's box, you could also add a permanent leveling system where reviewers are given a level that just keeps increasing the more you review. The amount of points needed to level up would increase exponentially for each level, so it would basically increase infinitely. This reward could be purely cosmetic, giving a few different rewards, like maybe an account badge that improves the higher level you are and can be displayed in the game somehow. There could also be some more substantial rewards, like receiving premium features and bonuses in the official Hytale server or a game code for your friend after 20,000 reviews. I think that with all the features discussed so far, we would have a great self-sufficient review system that would be both fast and extremely cheap to run. However, this review system is completely worthless if we don't have solid guidelines to go with it. When you're cooking, having the necessary equipment is nice and all, but without the proper recipe, the only thing your amateur chefs are going to make is dubious food and suspicious stew. Unfortunately, making guidelines is extremely difficult because you need to take into account every possible eventuality. So the only real way to perfect them is through trial and error. But changing guidelines is extremely annoying to deal with as both a creator and a reviewer, so it's something we would want to get right as soon as possible. And if we have to change these guidelines at any point, it better be large sweeping changes rather than incremental nitpicks every week, as that would just drive people absolutely mad. Minecraft Persona items. And the most important thing to get right in a guideline is using clear language. This means we need to establish a comprehensive list of terminology that the guideline will be using. Then you add guidelines for texture changes and another set for models. And finally, you need to figure out what constitutes the Orbis art style. The biggest challenge in creating the style guidelines will be avoiding a voxelated style known as voxelation. This term is very hard to define, which is what makes it so difficult to moderate. It can easily be confused with voxel art, which is just when models are made up from cubes. Voxelation, on the other hand, is when you create shapes and minute details using multiple perpendicular cubes. This is the style used in games like Cube World and Lay of the Land. There's nothing wrong with this art style, but it should never be used in the Orbis art style. With the Orbis art style, cubes should almost never be perpendicular to each other, and smaller details should never be represented with a large number of cubes. Only larger, more significant elements of a design should be represented with cubes, and in most cases, the cubes will be slightly rotated in comparison to its parent. There would also be ways to automatically prevent some voxelation in the Blockbench plugin. Basically, when two cubes are perpendicular, the corners of the cubes, also known as the vertices, should never share a position, as this is something you would typically only do when making something voxelated. You could also limit the amount of perpendicular cubes allowed in a group, and then make it so that each group has to be slightly rotated from its parent. These limitations would not apply to planes, as they do not contribute to voxelation, so you just make an exception when the cube has a width of 0. A warning should also be displayed when you create more than 2 perpendicular cubes within a group, with a hyperlink to an explanation of what voxelation is and how to avoid it. For the rest of the rules explaining the Orbis art style, I'm just going to put them on the screen. This is a non-exhaustive list, and I'm sure Thomas and Stein can easily finish this list. Though it's important to have strict guidelines, you should also not go too hard in the paint. The total sum of rules need to be kept as low as possible, so you need to consolidate as much as possible, and you need to avoid any unnecessary additions. If you don't do this, you will stifle creativity, and it's generally bad treatment of your characters. Being bogged down with frivolous rules gets really exhausting and makes you want to stop altogether. As an example, here are some reasons that Microsoft has given me for rejecting Minecraft Persona items. Cubes must be rotated in intervals of 45 degrees. Can't have continuous shapes and S-curves. Any use of 1 pixel thick cube automatically means it's voxelated. Rotated cubes cannot intersect with the character. No use of the standard galactic alphabet. No depiction of TNT. High-waist pants must also cover the torso. Playing dead is blocked because of morbidity. Putting the character's hand anywhere near the crotch area is automatically considered sexual. Recoiling your arms is pantomimed violence. If you notice that these rules are a bit silly and probably shouldn't be rules at all, you would be 100% correct. There's a very important lesson that can be learned from this. You cannot make rules for every eventuality without going way overboard and banning everything, so just let reviewers use their common sense. By giving examples of what is right and what is wrong, you can give them a general idea of what you want instead of making them follow a script like a robot. They are human and they will know better than any algorithm you can come up with. Sometimes they will get things wrong, and that's fine. As long as they can keep the game relatively safe and pleasant, the system works. There's no need to over-police and overcorrect because, as you know, Simon, if you find people who clearly know what they're doing, you should just trust them. And if you do manage to pull this off, then hopefully Elrich will get to play as a silly little skeleton. Let me know if you need any help. Bye!